What's up everybody, and welcome back to another video. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kevin Palko and I am a professional arm wrestler, or competitive arm wrestler as I like to call it, because I don't make a living doing this sport. I'm also the coach of the Cleveland Armwrestling team, and I've competed in some of the biggest competitions that our sport has to offer. I'm an Arnold Classic champion, a two-time national champion, and I've competed in one of our major organizations, which is Arm Wars. I'm currently ranked number 1 in Ohio at 154 pounds, number 7 in the United States, and at one time I was the number 1 ranked guy in the United States. However, it's hard to stay on top. So now that you know my background, I think I'm a little bit qualified to answer some of these questions, and that gets us into the video. Today, I'm going to be answering the most Googled questions about arm wrestling. I got some note cards made up. I shuffled them all around so that the questions are a surprise to me, like they will be to you. So stick around. This should be a fun one. All right, guys, I got my note cards here, and let's get on to question number 1. Is arm wrestling an Olympic sport? Arm wrestling is not an Olympic sport. However, there has been a big push to get arm wrestling into the Olympics in the past. However, I think that's kind of died down, and arm wrestling is now going more towards the path of maybe the UFC or WWE, where it's more for entertainment value and having the big production value. So I think that's where arm wrestling's heading, and could be a good thing for the sport. Is arm wrestling a good measure of strength? Yes, I think arm wrestling is a great measure of strength. For one, it's one-on-one, you versus another person, and ultimately, it's gonna come down to who's stronger. Is arm wrestling a sport? So we already went over that it's not an Olympic sport, but is it a regular sport? Yes, arm wrestling is a sport. However, it's not a sanctioned sport, and it's not recognized by our government. However, you do have local competitions, state competitions, national competitions, and world competitions. Arm wrestling is getting bigger, and one day it might be recognized by our government, and we might have high school wrestling for all we know. So yes, arm wrestling is a sport. Is arm wrestling bad for your arm? So in arm wrestling, we see guys such as Devin Larratt, Michael Todd, Crazy George. And after doing arm wrestling for over 30 years, they can no longer straighten their arm. It's basically stuck in this position. And that's due to the damage that was caused to their arm over the years, calcium buildup in their elbows, shortening of their tendons, ligament damage, and now they can no longer straighten their arm. Me personally, I've been doing this sport for almost 10 years, and I can straighten my arm out fully. So I think it all comes down to how you take care of your body, how you stretch, keep your arms stretched out, don't let things lock up. So it all comes down to how you want to maintain your body and how you want to keep yourself healthy. Interesting. Is Travis Beun still arm wrestling? Travis Beun is still active in the sport. However, he's not actively arm wrestling. I don't think he's done an arm wrestling competition in probably 3, 4, maybe 5 years. However, there are some rumors that he could be coming back. So we'll keep our eyes open. Maybe Travis Beun will be back on the table here soon. Do arm wrestlers use hand grippers? This has been a debated question in the arm wrestling community for a long time now. A lot of elite guys say, don't use grippers, they're a waste of time. Other elite guys say, yes, use hand grippers, they don't hurt. I personally don't use hand grippers. The only time I do use them are for hypertrophy, just trying to basically build the hand up and make it thicker. Do arm wrestlers train forearms every day? So every arm wrestler probably has a different training schedule. And for me personally, I train forearms twice a week in the gym, and I have 2 table practices. So that's pretty much 4 days of arm wrestling per week. Some arm wrestlers might be different. Some arm wrestlers might do 1 table practice a week and different type of training in the gym. But for me personally, forearms, 4 days a week. Is arm wrestling safe? So just like any other sport, especially if it's a contact sport, a physical sport, or a strength sport, there is risk for injury. And as long as you're doing arm wrestling with good technique and not overtraining, arm wrestling can be a safe sport. I've arm wrestled for, like I said, almost 10 years now, and I've only had minor injuries. Most injuries that we see in arm wrestling, especially arm breaks, come within the first 1 to 3 years. Will arm wrestling build muscle? Arm wrestling is strenuous on the muscles, just like working out. The more strain you put on those muscles, the bigger they'll become. So yes, I believe arm wrestling will build muscle, but it builds the muscles that we use while arm wrestling. So that's why you see a lot of arm wrestlers that have huge forearms and huge biceps, because those are the muscles that we're using the most. Is arm wrestling all about strength? So, though arm wrestling is a strength sport, it's also a combat sport. So, in arm wrestling, you have to have technique in order to use that strength. So, yes, arm wrestling is about strength, but you have to have that technique first. Is arm wrestling about strength? It's pretty much the same question. Yes, arm wrestling is about strength, but you have to have your technique first. Once guys are equal with their technique, then it ultimately comes down to who's stronger. Is arm wrestling bad for you? In my opinion, there's nothing bad about arm wrestling. It's majorly a good thing. Everybody needs to have some sort of hobby or something that they love, enjoy doing. And for a lot of people, that's arm wrestling. And in my opinion, there's nothing bad about arm wrestling. So get into it. How to build an arm wrestling table. So I've seen people build arm wrestling tables out of wood. I've seen people that are good welders, manufactured out of steel. For me personally, I would just buy one. That way you know you're getting the correct dimensions, everything is regulation size, and you have nothing to worry about. So if you want to buy an arm wrestling table, I would look for armassassinstrengthshop.com, Ezreal arm wrestling tables, or Legacy arm wrestling tables. What muscles does arm wrestling use? So arm wrestling is very strenuous on the hand, the wrist, the forearms, the inner elbow, the pronator, the biceps. Those are going to be your major muscle groups that you use in arm wrestling. Now the big muscle groups such as the lats, the chest, those are also important. But it all comes down to how strong the hand, wrist, and the forearm is. How to train arm wrestling. In my opinion, there's multiple different ways to train arm wrestling. The most important being table time. Table time is when you get together with your team or just your training partner and you're arm wrestling on the table. You're never going to get better at the sport unless you do the sport. Secondly, you have arm wrestling specific workouts. These are usually done on an arm wrestling table with a pulley machine that's attached to the table. We have arm wrestling specific handles that are going to, attack the hand, the wrist, the forearm, and make those arm wrestling muscles stronger. Thirdly, you have gym specific arm wrestling workouts where you're just doing your standard gym workouts that are working your hand, wrist, forearm, even your bench press, your lat rows. Those are going to be your gym specific arm wrestling workouts. How much does arm wrestling pay? Ultimately, we are professional arm wrestlers. We should be making big money arm wrestling. For me personally, $0. When I won the Arnold Classic, I won $500. However, that's just me. There are arm wrestlers out there that are contracted by these major organizations, and they still are not getting paid enough to solely make a living off of arm wrestling. 99% of arm wrestlers still work a 9-to-5 job, and the arm wrestlers that are making a living off the sport, they are the elite of the elite. And also they have YouTube and they have social media that they are making most of their money off of. So unfortunately, arm wrestling does not pay the most right now. However, as the sport grows, it's only going to bring in more money. How to start arm wrestling? So this is probably one of the most important questions. In order to start arm wrestling, you should probably find a team or a club in your area. Most people will have an arm wrestling team, hopefully within at least an hour of their home. In order to find an arm wrestling team, a lot of the arm wrestling forums on Facebook, just go on there, type in, does anybody arm wrestle near Cleveland? Somebody will get back to you. Yes, Kevin, he is the coach of the Cleveland arm wrestling team, and you'll find somebody. How to win at arm wrestling? Well, that almost goes hand in hand with the last question. Find a club. Find somebody that knows how to arm wrestle, that can teach you the ways, teach you the technique, teach you how to get stronger. That is the best way to win at arm wrestling. Does arm wrestling make you stronger? Absolutely, arm wrestling makes you stronger, but it's only going to make you stronger at arm wrestling. If I only arm wrestle, it's not going to make my bench press stronger, it's not going to make my deadlift stronger. However, it's going to make you stronger in those arm wrestling specific areas. Do arm wrestlers get drug tested? So yes and no. 99% of arm wrestling competitions are not drug tested. The World Arm Wrestling Federation and the International Federation of Arm Wrestling both drug test at their world championships. Other than that, 99% of competitions, not drug tested. Is arm wrestling dangerous? Arm wrestling is a competitive sport. It's a contact sport, a physical sport. Yes, it can be dangerous. Learn the proper techniques, don't overtrain, and you'll be just fine. Do arm wrestlers train every day? Everybody has a different training schedule. Some arm wrestlers might train every day. Some arm wrestlers might not train every day. It all comes down to how you recover and what you think you need to do to get stronger. I personally probably train 5 to 6 days a week. I usually take 1 or 2 off days. Do arm wrestlers train their legs? Legs? I don't know what legs are. In all seriousness, people that have to make a weight class, probably don't train their legs too much because we don't want that mass in other parts of our body. If I can be 154 pounds, I want the majority of that weight in my upper body and my arms. It's going to be a lot harder for me to make 154 pounds if I'm doing squats, and now I have these huge quads and thighs. So I think it all comes down to if you have to make that weight class, that'll probably determine if arm wrestlers are training their legs. The one everybody's been waiting for. Do arm wrestlers use steroids? The short answer is probably yes. The way I look at it is any person that does professional bodybuilding will never win the Mr. Olympia unless they're using steroids. It's kind of the same with arm wrestling. A natural person will never be able to compete with Devin Larratt, Denis Cyplenkov, or Levon Saginishvili without using steroids. So yes, arm wrestlers do use steroids. How is arm wrestling affected by microgravity? That is not a question for me. That's one we'll have to ask Todd Hutchins. I don't even know what that means. Do arm wrestlers break arms? So in arm wrestling, there is the chance that you can break your arm. And most of the time, your opponent doesn't break your arm, you break your own arm. And that's from being in a dangerous position or using bad technique. Also, like I said earlier, most arm wrestling injuries happen between years 1 and 3 because our bodies are not built up to withstand the arm wrestling pressures. Once your body becomes calcified and becomes stronger, you have a less likely chance of breaking your arm. How much does arm wrestling pay? For me personally, I don't make anything. For the contracted athletes, they could make enough as a secondary income. Like I said, most arm wrestlers are working a 9-to-5 job, and we can't afford to live just off of arm wrestling. Is arm wrestling technique or strength? So arm wrestling is all technique until technique becomes equal. Once two guys have equal technique, then it comes down to who's stronger. Does strength matter in arm wrestling? Absolutely, strength matters in arm wrestling. However, like I just said, strength does not matter unless you have the technique. If somebody can bench press 500 pounds, but they've never arm wrestled before, they're not going to beat me who can only bench press 250 pounds. And the last question, how to watch arm wrestling. So most major organizations are easy to find. They're on streaming platforms, etc. King of the Table, East vs. West, those are the two biggest companies in arm wrestling right now. They are Core Sports affiliates. You can go on coresports.com or download that app and you'll be able to find all arm wrestling events. Arm Wars is a YouTube channel, arm wrestling promotion. As long as you become a member of their channel, you can watch all their exclusive content. As far as YouTube in general, there's so many events on YouTube that you can watch. There's old WAL events, there's World Arm Wrestling Federation events, there's the replays of East vs. West and King of the Table. So YouTube is huge. Just type in arm wrestling, you'll find something. So that was our last question of the day. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I had fun answering these questions. Some of the questions were dumb, some of them are repeats, but ultimately the questions were good and I enjoyed answering them. So with that being said, I appreciate you guys watching and we will see you next time.